Welcome, 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 everybody. And if you would like to just in the chat box connect in and say hi, let us know where you are connecting from. If you would like to turn on your camera so I can see your beautiful faces like Feriel and Marcella and Encarna and Debbie and Oriane and Anna. Anna, fancy seeing you here. And Virginia. And Krunoslava, I'm not sure if that's your first name or your second name. Anna as well, Felicia. I've got a Zoom user. I recognize your face, but I don't know your name. It's Timea. Is it Timea? Yes. Pinta, yes, Larissa, Bernadette, Svetlana, Sue. Sue, we were just together last week. My goodness, how quickly a week goes. Nina, Isabella, Natalia, David. Hi, Ingrid. Yes, Olivia with your heart. Fantastic. Giselle and Faye. Brian, great to see you too. Anastasia, Marta, Marina. Wow. Loads of beautiful faces today that I'm seeing. Elsa, Daniela, and Derek. I think you're turning on as well. Ina, hi. Martha, fantastic. Beautiful to see you all. Oriane, I'm not sure if I said hi to you. Hi, I can see you up there in the top corner. Caroline as well. Wow. Welcome. Now, I'm conscious it's Friday night. I'm conscious you should be out on the town, but you're here with me, so thank you. Let's make it a special evening. I'm probably going to roll for a couple of, well, an hour and a half. When I get in the flow, I lose track of time. So if any of you do need to disappear, please do, because I know I'm conscious it's Friday night. So let's get going. Now, tonight we are looking at the emotional triggers, and I do think, this is a topic that is extremely important and a topic that we have been, may I say, talking about for 10 years now. And I'm fascinated that now more and more are coming into this and understanding that this is really something that we have to get right for any learning to take place. Full stop. So as educators of the 21st century, which we are all converting into, we really have to be building up this sensitivity. That sensitivity means that the awareness starts with us, to then bring it to them, to then be able to understand how to handle them. Now, I really wanted just to take you on a little bit of this 10-year journey, everybody. Because I know a lot of people think that, Neurolanguage and Neuroheart is a kind of like a recent wonder, but actually it's been a 10-year blood, sweat and tears along the way. And it's developed little by little. It's been a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of discovering, a lot of evolution. And I would say that I personally have definitely evolved with this concept. I know many of you have evolved with this concept. And may I suggest that we're still evolving with this concept, all of us, even me. And we are, adjusting, adapting, creating along the way. And more is going to be coming from this. And very, 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 may I say, honored that many of you are on this journey together with me. And, very grateful as well. We are now just over 1,300 Neurolanguage coaches worldwide. There are 32 teacher trainers and more coming in. And we're delivering in 12 different languages and more languages coming in too. So we are ripple, slowly across the globe we go. And the greatest vision for all of us is that you, the educators, are going to be changing the way that education is delivered. And you, the educators, are going to be slowly turning so many heads that the systems, the schools, the institutions will change with you. That's the vision that we all have. And I think we all share at some level. Now, I was playing with this a little bit, and here you go. IQ plus EQ, everybody talks about IQ and EQ. Well, let's put them in the equation of IQ, EQ plus education, obviously is going to lead to neuro-heart education. And IQ, EQ plus language Q is going to lead to neurolanguage coaching. So just a little bit of play before we start. Now, IQ, intelligence, yes, we do need to understand the brain. Yes, we do need to understand this central operating system that we all have. We're all unique. Everybody's different. How do we adapt? That's the key question for the IQ. And then for the EQ, it is about the in-depth knowledge of emotional brain, of social and emotional pain, about trauma and stress and learning. And it's also about how we can coach around these triggers. And that's where we're going tonight with this webinar. I will repeatedly say this. I do believe there is a perfect learning state. Whether they call it the alpha state, the flow state, however it is, there is a state where all of us learn instantly. And the imprinting actually is instantaneous. And I think that's the golden quest of every educator. How can I make it that everything is going to be imprinting instantly? That's the quest. So we're looking at that sensitivity, that equanimity in the learning process. And obviously we are looking about understanding the brain. Now, I don't know if any of you know, and I just want to go through this a little bit. It's only been quite recently that we have labeled fight, flight. That was in 1915. Walter Bradford Cannon was the first one to notice how animals behave under threat or involuntarily behave under threat. And he was the one that coined fight or flight, the readying the body to fight or readying the body to run. I was doing a little bit of research, and it's kind of developed into various phases. In 2010, you have the defense cascade, which then talks about the freeze, flight, fight, fright, flag, or faint. Other variations are the flop, when the animal flops dead, like my little horse in the drawing here, and we play dead to try to deceive the enemy. Or we befriend. And interestingly, this one by Pete Walker, where he introduces the fawn response. How many of you knew about the fawn response? Anybody? It's quite an interesting one, everybody. Larissa, you did, yes. It's quite an interesting one when you look at it, because they do say that it is often due to narcissistic parents that we go into this over agreement, overly helpful, and trying to always please everybody else. I'll leave that one with you to think about. Oh, I can see that I've got flock or friend again. Sorry, I had it twice then. Now, as many of you know, in September, actually, it'll be 12 weeks this Sunday, I broke my leg, my fibula. And it's the first time in my life that I've ever broken anything. And actually, it was the first time in my life that I couldn't run. And can I share that there are a few moments, I live in the middle of the countryside, and there were a few moments over those weeks where I was laid up, not able to run. In the middle of the night, if I heard a strange noise, I was waking up and I was actually going into a state of pure terror. Now, for me, it was very interesting because, it was like, whoa, what on earth is this? And now I understand it was because I knew subconsciously that I couldn't run. That if something was happening, if the house was on fire or whatever, I was stuck. And interestingly, there is this question of, normally if an animal has a broken leg, the other animals leave it there to die. And I thought, in those first weeks that I was really in that situation, I was quite, it was a lot of thinking about this. Now, when we come into, obviously, a fight or flight situation, it's normally because we are under threat. There is danger. And I have taken these beautiful diagrams from this beautiful website, everybody, called www.majordifferences.com. And on the left, you can see central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system. And underneath that, you've got the sympa and the parasympa. Now, when we go into that threat response, you've got the sympathetic kicking in. And when we are in that relaxed state, you've got the parasympathetic. Paradise. We could connect it in that way so that you remember. I always had confusion which one is which. Para is paradise, and that's when you're in that calm, beautiful state with the parasympathetic nervous system. And also, just to share on a personal level as well, a few weeks ago, I went to have like a natural treatment. It took the gentleman 1 hour to get me into a calm state because my sympathetic nervous system is just, and I think it was because of the leg. I was constantly on alert. I was constantly thinking, I can't run. And it's quite interesting that subconsciously we don't realize just how much we are in that state of stress, adrenaline, cortisol. If we have learners in that state, they're not going to learn. So we need to be able to talk with our learners about this fight or flight response. In simple terms, we need to be able to be explaining. Now, I created this diagram from the description in the book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. And it's the description that the neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux talks about when we have this response. Now, my neurolanguage coaches, you know this very well. Yeah, you've seen this various times. It's about you having the capacity to explain this, whether it's a child, a teenager, or an adult, and adapting it to their level of understanding. Mind Up Foundation with Goldie Hawn, they use puppets to explain to children, which is beautiful because they really do show this fight or flight, what's happening, and the brain and the emotional brain. And they use that sort of image of the puppets and the story to help children to understand. 90% of the population, according to Bessel van der Kolk, will have post-traumatic stress disorder at some point in their life. And the reason I'm saying that is because many, many times we all suffer panic attacks. And believe me, it can happen when you're a child, a teenager, and a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, it could happen when you're 50, at any time in your life. I can imagine that all of us have had moments of panic attacks, all of us. Now, one of the major points is that when we have a panic attack, we think we're the only ones in the world that this happens to, because we never talk about it. And this is exactly the same as our learners. Our learners think they are the only ones in the world that are feeling this because nobody talks about it. So now it is about being able to ask, to share, and take them through this. Now, I've had this dialogue with 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 20-year-olds. And literally, as a coach, may I share with you a little bit about the brain? We take it step by step, and I check in with them all the way through. Can I check, is this something that you're experiencing? Can I check with you to share with me what it is that you feel when you go into that panicked state? Now, I know that many of you, neurolanguage coaches here, are already doing that as well with your learners. Am I right? Yes. Ingrid, can I ask you to share with me what's the response you normally get when you share this information? Oh, can you? Let me see if I can get you onto the microphone. Sorry, that might be me with my technological genius. So I'm allowing you to unmute. There you go.
Now possible, yeah. So I lost you with this. So yes. I share this with them, and well, a lot of possibilities I have there as a neurolanguage coach to step in when they have this feeling. So we always try, and this is what I told them first. So you need to be calm, no stress, and just relax. And even today, so this is why it just came to my mind, I had a situation where there was a complete blackout. Nothing moved forward, backward, nothing. And so I said, relax, so stay calm, everything's okay. And we were talking about something completely different. I said, we have to unblock your brain again. So you are too much focused on one thing. Yeah. And then he started talking about this, and then suddenly he said, oh, I know the word, by the way. I said, oh, there you go.
Yes. Yes.
Brain working again. Right.
Absolutely. When you move into that distraction, then the brain starts to get back into normal, and then it can start to function as normal. Yes. Yes. And how about sharing what's happening with the amygdala, what's happening with the fight or flight? Anybody like to share the response you get from your learners when you talk to them about the physiology of the situation? I think I saw Lucian somewhere. Lucian, you're normally with kiddies as well. I'm curious what you do with kiddies. I'll come back to you in a minute. Virginia, yes.
Hi, hello again, everybody. Yeah, sometimes when that happens, I will explain to them my concept of the front of the bus and the back of the bus. You know, the prefrontal cortex and the back of the brain, and what happens when that flow is blocked. And as you've often said, Rachel, when we explain to clients what's happening physiologically, I can see their shoulders drop. I can see them relax a little bit, and then because we're talking about that, it provides a bit of a distraction for them, and then they can start flowing again. That serves to unblock them many times.
Fantastic. I love that. We're going to come to the front of the bus and the back of the bus in a minute again. Lucian, how are you getting on with your kiddies that you're with?
Yes, I had a very interesting experience. Hello, everyone. With somebody that it's a little girl from my town. So she was very, very hyped up, not very hyped up, very stressed out when she had to say anything in English. And then I tried to slowly get to know her, get her in the mood of, talking about things that she loves. Okay. And then after I explained to her, okay, whenever, the process in the brain and everything, she was like, aha. And then recently we have incredible lessons, and we're talking about makeup. That's her love, that's her passion. And yeah, there you go. It just flows right now. Perfect.
Fantastic.
So
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Lucian.
Sure.
And yes, sharing with children really does help them to understand. And I do think, the more that we can help children to manage their brains, the more they're going to also be able to cope with life as they get older. I wish I had known more when I was a kid what was happening. Now, we also have to bear in mind that there's not only the fight or flight, where we've got that sort of fight, flight, freeze, we've also got the social and emotional pain, which could also lead to fight, flight, freeze. Now, Lieberman, some brilliant videos of Lieberman out there on YouTube, on Vimeo. Do have a look at his work. It is phenomenal. I'm going to say, I have no words for it, except for the fact that this work is 20 years old. My shock that this is not more well known. It's 20 years old, everybody, this work, where he demonstrates the brain responds the same, whether it's physical pain or whether it's social and emotional pain. And taking a pain relief tablet relieves social pain. That's how much the brain doesn't see the difference. Well, doesn't notice the difference. So what's the reason that more and more educators don't know about this? What's the reason that more and more schools are not getting their educators to become educated about this? And again, you are the ones making the difference here. You are the ones who are bringing this loud and clear out there, and understanding that we have to be very sensitive with the way that we are delivering, communicating, teaching, coaching. Now, language learning is, as Virginia said, it's front to back, back to front. Let's do this in a very simplistic way. Whatever we learn is coming into short-term memory, working memory, this part of the brain, prefrontal cortex. That's where we're battling away theory, information, data, etc. The more that we are taking it in and it's becoming more long-term, the more it's getting stored into other areas of the brain. Language fluency is coming from the cerebellum, which is at the back of the brain. We have this beautiful flow front to back, because we need to retrieve from the cerebellum into the working memory to get that language working. We need to intake to then get it into the long term to get it into the fluency. So it really is front to back, front to back to front. And I always say that if there is an emotional trigger, the midbrain, the limbic region, almost serves like a gateway in the middle. And if there is an emotional trigger, that gateway is coming up. And that's where you've got the flow is stopped. Absolutely. How many of us know that? Because we've experienced it. We get tongue-tied, we can't speak, we stutter, the word doesn't come. And there may be certain situations where this happens. I definitely notice it. And for me, it's very curious, especially when I'm in Spanish. Spanish is my most fluent bilingual language that I have. But if there is something that triggers me, I notice the flow is hindered. And then it's the question of, okay, what is triggering me here? Interestingly, the studies that alcohol actually improves language production has been researched and proven by this university in Holland. Notice it is in Holland. They are called, well, it's Dutch courage. That's what we call it in English. So it was a Netherlands university that actually researched it. And, you know, one of the reasons for that is because alcohol inhibits the prefrontal cortex. We come back to the same thing. You've got that front to back flow. By the way, when you get into the flow, the neuroscientific explanation of the flow state is transient hyperfrontality, where the prefrontal cortex, if you like, is removed from the equation. So it's, let's say, silent. And that allows the other areas of the brain, I call it, to play. And the other areas of the brain can connect and flow very easily because they don't have this prefrontal cortex interference. That's exactly what happens with the consumption of alcohol. Now, obviously, you know, learning a language is not a life or death situation. It might be in some cases. If you're living in a country and you've got an emergency, it might be. But normally, language learning is not life or death. It is something that triggers us, but it's not an emergency. However, our brain does not understand the difference because the trigger is giving us the signals that this is life or death. This is an emergency. And what we have to do, and if we go back to this diagram with Ledoux, we have to go down the left side. We have to go in the high road. High road means that we're going from the midbrain up to the prefrontal cortex, where we rationalize, analyze, observe, and then react. So in fact, we train our brain not to go into the fight or flight. And one of the secrets of life, and I think it's the secret for everything in life, when we normalize something, when we create something as a habit or as a program for the brain, that's when the brain becomes quiet, happy, because it takes that as something that's normal. And the question for us as language learners or for our learners is, how are you going to normalize the language for the brain? The brain should think that this second language is just the same as speaking the first. There should be no difference for the brain. And at what point is that normalization going to happen? Well, obviously it's going to happen with lots of practice. It's like getting in the car, driving the car for the first time. At what point do you drive the car with that automatic program and you don't think about everything that's happening? And it always depends on how many times you've done it, how much you've exposed the brain to that activity or that learning. And along the way to normalizing it, we have to understand, let's identify the threats and let's train the brain into the happy reward state. And by the way, that's why you've got the picture of the baby, because I thought just having a happy baby there is going to give that feeling of the brain being quiet, happy, in reward, and able to operate. So let's have a look at these emotional triggers. Many of you may actually know that I call them pink elephants. Somebody once asked me why pink, because normally we say the elephant in the room, but there are some expressions that do talk about the pink elephant in the room. If you have an emotional trigger, we need to remove it from the equation so that we can get the brain into the learning state. If we don't, it's not going to happen. We know from the University of Bochum, one of my old universities, that just one drop of cortisol disrupts neuroplasticity. Just one drop of cortisol disrupts the learning. So we have to identify and remove the pink elephant, or the pink elephants. There might be more than one in the room. By the way, this was one that we found in Lisbon. When we did our conference in Lisbon some years ago, we actually found this on the street. And one of our coaches did the picture, took the picture. So, potential triggers for language learners. Well, I've broken them down a bit into a different way. First one is the way that we communicate. We're going to go into these one by one, by the way. We're going to go deeper into each of them. Second one, xenoglossophobia and or negative emotions. We've separated out status issues. Then we've got the threat to autonomy, lack of certainty, and then lack of connection. And we're going to explore each of them so that you have a clearer picture of what I mean with them all. So, teacher communication. I would say this is one of the first triggers that obviously we're responsible for. Without realizing it sometimes, subconsciously, we don't realize that how we communicate has a great, great impact on the learners. You know, for those of you who are old enough to remember the fingernails on the blackboard, sometimes I do think the way that we talk can have this effect on the amygdala. It can really arouse that feeling of aggravation. And we might not realize it as a learner until we get to that point where we've had enough. So it might be an accumulated frustration that we're carrying for a long time until we get to that point where we just don't want to be there. We don't want to be communicating with that teacher. We don't want to interact. We switch off. Or we react. Sometimes you get learners who are niggly or react in maybe a negative way. And it could be because of this. Now, some years ago, I was interested in this sort of question of not only certainty, but also the question of the words and expressions that we use. Negative words do release stress and anxiety, and can also contribute to long-term anxiety, by the way. So how can we always take our communication into a positive line, into a positivity approach, and into a growth mindset, creating certainty and growth mindset? That should be something that we are promoting with whatever we're talking about. And here, the things that we have to really take care of are the imperatives. How conscious are we of the imperatives, the orders, and the commands that we're bringing out in that learning process? You know, we're coming into the era of metacognition. Metacognition means self-observation. The first step to any change is awareness. To be aware, we have to observe. The brain gives feedback to every other single part of the body. What gives feedback to the brain? Has to be the brain. So you have to be operating with your prefrontal cortex, observing your subconscious behaviors, your subconscious communication. because most of what we do is in a very programmed, patterned way, because we've been doing it like this for years and years and years and years. And the only way to start to put the spotlight on that is by switching on the prefrontal cortex and observing yourself, observing ourselves. And it's not easy, but it's not impossible. So we are going to be observing self, becoming aware. And once we're aware, then we can start to bring in the changes. Changing imperatives means asking permission, softening the imperatives. May I ask you, could we possibly, how about, what do you think if? Shall we move on to this now? And having your repertoire of permission questions. And that's going to soften the imperatives. Now, can I say, you know, as educators, as coaches, obviously it depends on the age groups that you're working with. And there may be a time where you need to use an imperative. You have to know when you're going to need an imperative. If I can, I'd just like to share a little story with all of you. Quite a few years ago, by the way, somebody's got a wild microphone. I can hear it every now and again. Ah, Larissa, I think it's you. Just let me mute you. There you go. Quite a few years ago, it must be about 10, 12 years ago now, I had a young lady come to me. And by the way, if you've heard this story before, my apologies. If you haven't, then here we go. Young lady came to me from Italy, Italian. She needed to pass her final year in law. And she needed to pass a legal English exam. And she came to me 1 month before to pass this exam. Not only was it 1 month, it was her whole university degree rested on this exam. By the way, she was a friend of a friend, so I couldn't say no. I would have loved to say, I'm sorry, I'm too busy, but she was a friend of a friend, so I didn't. So first session, we sat there and she was very emotional, very distressed. Oh my God, I've got 1 month. Oh, I'm never going to do it. Oh my God, my English is terrible. Oh, we calmed her down. We spoke about the limbic system. We spoke about the emotional brain. We set up certainty with study plan. We brought in the fact that, yes, she could do this in a month. Wasn't impossible. She could really pull out all the stops and get it. So we created the study plan. She created her way of studying, her activities, everything. 2 days later, we had the second session. She was exactly the same as in square one. Emotional, I'm never going to do this. Oh my God, I'm never going to pass. Again, we went back into the emotional brain. We went back into the certainty. We went back into the study plan, step by step. Fine. Saw her the week after. The week after, then we had 3 weeks only. She was exactly back to square one. I'm never going to do this. Oh my God. That is when I got directive. And that is when I came in with a very clear message. You either get your head down, you do it, or you fail. At this point in time, you have the choice. You can manage the brain, get hold of it, settle down. You've got the plan. We've done it together. You've got it exactly day by day. And it's now your choice. She didn't. But she obviously needed that moment of reality hitting. Now, we have to find that balance between non-directive. Now I need to be directive. And by the way, if you've got kiddies, obviously you have to find that balance. And I'm going to say that normally with kiddies, we're never non-directive. I would say try it, because you'll be surprised that kiddies do respond when you ask them in a non-directive way with lots of permission, lots of love. Kiddies do respond in a different way. Timea, I can see you're nodding. I know you've got kiddies at home there. What have you discovered since you've done that with your kids? Can you come on the mic? Oh, I think I'm just, yes.
Yes, I just had to move a little bit because my son is playing on his tablet. So yes, definitely, it makes a massive difference because they come up with their with their ideas, and sometimes we get lots more done than when I just say like, okay, come on, let's do this. If I ask them like, shall we? How about if we? And
Yes.
then we get more done.
Yes, yes, they're more complicit and less antagonistic.
Yes.
So, thank you, Timea. Imperatives, definitely. Observing them, removing them. Questions, the way we ask questions, definitely observing them and getting used to one question at a time. I think all of us, even me, know that is the hardest habit to break. Just one question at a time. Open questions, not closed questions. Observe your questions. You know, when I started coaching 20 years ago, I couldn't believe how many closed questions came out of my mouth. Ah, gosh, it was a constant closed question. And even when I asked a closed question, it was like another closed question. And it really takes time to shape and change the way that we ask questions. Open questions are going to stimulate. And little by little, you start to understand when you can ask a closed question. You make the decision because you can use closed questions to be very powerful. But you have to know when to use them. Those questions are also dangerous because they can sound leading and they can sound judgmental. So a closed question could be, okay, do you think we could do this, this, and this now? I'm actually not giving you any choice. I'm just telling you what I think we should do, and I just want you to say yes. Would you repeat that for me? I'm not giving you any choice. I'm just giving you a closed question. What I need to do is be asking, what would you like to do now? What could help you in this moment to consolidate this? And get you to tell me. And by the way, the do you think, I think we need to eliminate it from our everyday speech anyway, you know, because do you think, you could be sitting there thinking that I think, and it's my judgment that's coming out. Do you think that's a good idea? Could sound like I'm questioning from a judgmental side. So again, all of this, it's about observing the impact as well of what we are saying. Because you will, the more sensitive you get, I do always think that the more we come into this, the more sensitive we become, the more we become what I call the language whisperer. You're sensing, you're feeling what the others are reacting to. And you're trying to change and adjust and adapt to the learner, not the learner to us. By the way, we are eliminating the word why. The other day I heard somebody say in a presentation, oh, I think Kate's just taken off there. Kate, I've just muted you. I think you were just about to take off somewhere. The other day I heard a presentation where somebody said, we don't say why anymore, but she didn't say the reason that we don't say why anymore. The reason we don't say why anymore is because it could totally, literally hit the emotional brain. And you could get a very emotional response. Why did you do that? Because defensive, aggressive response, because I'm feeling attacked. Now, if we change that to what is the reason for, you're getting that person to think about it logically, rationally, analytically. That's the reason we should move away from why, when it is attacking or touching a personal sphere. If it's an objective question, why does the sun rise in the east? Go for it. It doesn't affect anybody's personal, let's say, emotional makeup. And listening. We have to demonstrate that we're listening, but it's not enough just to nod and just to kind of all the time. We demonstrate that we're listening because we reformulate back. Am I hearing this? Is this what you're saying? Can I just check with you? And that's demonstrating that we are listening, we are interested, and we want to clarify and realize that we are on the same page. So reformulating is key. And not finishing off sentences. How many times do we, as educators, finish off a sentence thinking that we're rescuing them? Actually, our learners don't need rescuing. What they need is stimulating so they can say it for themselves. So we need to stand back, allow them thinking time and space. Everybody has thinking time and space that's different. You may take a few seconds more, a few seconds less to give me an answer. I need to hold off and allow you to give me that answer. By the way, you know, I get quite playful when I'm communicating with people, and when people finish off my sentences or they don't listen or whatever, I get a little bit playful. And if they jump in, I'll kind of say, well, actually, that's not what I was going to say. I was going to say something totally different. Because sometimes we jump in thinking that we know what they're going to say, but maybe we don't. And from the neuroscience, we know the person doing it learns it. If we are constantly jumping in and doing it for them, they're not learning it. We have to stand back, allow the silence. So the way we communicate is key. And as many of the neurolanguage coaches know, even the way that we deliver grammar is with that brain-friendly coaching conversation. We're not there to teach, we're there to really stimulate. And we're constantly asking them, what do you know? Where are you scaffolding from? And we use a coaching model to create a very dynamic, gentle, interactive conversation about theory, which is the driest possible topic on earth. And it suddenly becomes alive because they're talking about it as if it were a normal chat. It's normalized, let's put it that way. So the way we communicate is key. That's going to be one of the first triggers that we have to pay attention to. Now, second triggers that we have to pay attention to are the ones which are really the emotional ones. Maybe the feelings of shame, the feelings of embarrassment, the feelings of social pain, emotional pain. Maybe we even have those feelings of negative beliefs, childhood memories. All of these are things that we have to be able to coach around. Now, the emotions, the emotional experience is key. And interestingly, you know, again, we come back into how we communicate connected with emotions. Quite a few, if we think about some of the areas of the earth quite a few educational systems in the past and even now come into a little bit the tough love approach. I know some of you know the sports coach Lee Campbell, who was at one of our conferences, and Lee is the one who was working with Andy, who had cerebral palsy. And Lee and I had quite a few conversations about tough love. And I discovered this research which demonstrates that, you know, when we are offering education with this approach, it does not work. It really can lead to mental health problems. I always think about the film with the ballet dancer, Black Swan. I don't know if any of you saw that. And she went through that training as a Russian ballet dancer, you know, very classical training, classical ballet school, lots of psychological abuse, tough love. She was the best ballerina, but in her late 20s, early 30s, she had psychological problems. And I do think tough love is something that either makes or breaks. And with many, many kiddies, even with adults, it breaks. And even these, you know, this research demonstrating that boot camps increase the likelihood of committing offenses from kiddies. Wow. So emotions, dopamine effect is going to be key in the learning. We need to get that sort of feeling of moving them away from school, away from, let's say, the classical teacher who is trying to be very serious and stern. And also, I do think as well, we need to move away from pressure to perform. Sometimes our learners have emotional problems because they are pressured to perform. Now, I remember when I was a little girl, I actually, in 1 year, I had excellent results from mathematics. And the way the teacher presented the results from the exams was even, I'm going to say, damaging. Because she was so shocked that I got those results, she made it known that she was so shocked and surprised. And that made me feel under pressure thereafter to always get good results. And I never did again. Never. That 1 year was the only year I got top marks in mathematics. After that, I started failing and failing and failing because I was presented with this way of, goodness, Rachel, you got top marks. That's, well, I'm so surprised, you know, and it was like, wow, okay. She's shocked, I'm shocked. So, you know, the messages that we're bringing across as educators, even with adult learners, we have to, again, be very careful of how we are even giving results to learners. So, what can we do to avoid these emotional triggers? One thing that we can do is really move away from school vocabulary, school memories. What we want, if you have learners who are, I'm going to say after school learners, adults, we need to really make sure that we are using words that connect them into a new process, coaching process, a service process. We're moving away from words like test or exam. We're going into review or consolidation work. We're moving away from the word grammar. We're going into the mechanics of the language. Instead of class, we've got sessions or meetings. And even with kids, you know, maybe we could even create a whole new way of talking about the language learning process with kids, so it becomes fun. What could we use as words? So maybe we could talk about curiosity. for kids. Or we could talk about the fun moments. Or we could talk about the nuts and bolts that bring the language together instead of grammar. So there it's about being creative and imaginative and really making sure that those words are not triggering our learners back and back and back. Also negative beliefs, working on coaching conversations that focus on solutions. If they feel they cannot do something, firstly, recognizing, I'm really sorry that you feel this way. And then moving into what needs to happen for you to feel better. How do we get you to feel progress or feel happier with your learning journey here? How can we make it enjoyable? And as many of you know, for Bad Learning Moments, we do have a very special conversation, coaching conversation, which pinpoints the exact moment when that bad memory came in. And we try to pinpoint it and we get them to rationalize it. What should the teacher have done? What could the teacher have done? And now, what can we do so that you're never reminded of it again? And finally, if you've got people who are feeling embarrassed, feeling frustrated, get them to label the emotions. How are you feeling when you speak English or the target language? May I ask you to give me concrete emotions that are happening when you're speaking? And let's label them, because the more that we label them, the more we're moving them from the emotional to the rational brain. And labeling neutralizes the emotions. By the way, this can be for anything that you're feeling in life. If you're feeling frustrated or angry about anything, say it. I'm feeling angry right now. Get it out. And help your brain to bring it into that rational, logical. And let's take it into a positive direction. How could we use, obviously adult learners, how could we use our brain to take us into positive learning from school? In the conference this year, I think it was, so some of you already heard me say this, over the past couple of years, I think all of us have had that nasty experience of COVID at some point. And I think it was last February when I had my last little visit from that. And it knocked me out for a couple of days. And I was lying in bed and thinking, okay, how can I sort of play with my brain here because I can't do anything else? And I was intrigued to know if I could get myself into a very relaxed state and if I could try to retrieve more memories from the past. And what I did, I actually connected into a year at school, let's say 19, oh, that would tell my age, wouldn't it, if I tell you that? 19 blah, blah. I then started to think about, okay, which class was I in? Who was my head? Who was my teacher in that class? Where was I sitting? And what was I learning? You know, what was that teacher bringing to me? What was I doing? And I tried to trigger learning from the past. And it was quite interesting because the more I was doing it, the more I was coming into, okay, this is the year, this is the teacher, this is the classroom, the more other memories started flooding in. And I tried it with other years and with other years. So the more relaxed we get, the more we can retrieve information. Now, I've had this with learners that come to me and say, and I think it happened with Valerie, I don't know if Valerie's here. Valerie was with me in a session one day and we were talking, I think we were doing Spanish or something. I can't remember if it was Spanish or Italian. And the more we started to get into that sort of conversation of what she could remember and what not, and the more relaxed she was, the more she was just coming out with language that she hadn't spoken for 40 years. That's what we want. We want to be triggering stored information. The more you get them into a calm, interactive, normalized state, the more chances they are going to retrieve learning from years and years and years ago. Let's move to the next trigger that I've sort of highlighted, and this is status issues. And I have to confess that this is when my Spanish goes. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this webinar that, you know, sometimes even my most fluent language gets triggered. And I've observed, if I feel that I'm with somebody in authority and I start to get a little bit nervous, that's when I start to get tongue-tied. So with status, I think we need our learners to be identifying it and observing it, like I have with my Spanish. So when are they getting triggered? Are they in meetings? Is there a certain business situation? Is there a certain person that triggers them? Is it authority? Is it boss? Is it peer? Is it team that I'm working with? And get them to really identify what is the problem, what is the status issue. And then to create the strategies to deal with it. Now that we understand this is the trigger, what's going to calm it down? What do you need if that situation repeats itself? Maybe in meetings, it needs a lot of rehearsing of scenarios, questions, interruptions, giving input. And rehearse those scenarios. Remember, the more that we go into rehearsal, the more we are creating episodic memories. Episodic memories are extremely powerful. Rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. And how about the independent, autonomous person who feels threatened? I love this little picture of this little girl here, demonstrating the independent little girl, or there could be an independent little boy here as well. Personally, I do think we're all pretty autonomous, even kiddies. And I think that many, many times as children, we do feel threatened a lot when we're told constantly what to do with imperatives. So open questions, as much as you can, open questions are going to stimulate that autonomy. And also, you know, we're going to be trying to find out what that person wants. Everybody's different. Every brain is different. We're all unique. So how can we respect each other's uniqueness? And if I'm asking you, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? As an educator, and if my learner says, well, you're the teacher, you tell me, I'm then going to explain the reasons for it. I'm going to explain, look, this is because I know that the more you take ownership of this process, the more you go into that autonomous learner state, the more you're going to learn. And the more we get you doing things that you enjoy, the better brain chemistry, the better brain state you're going to be in. It's going to stick better. So therefore, we promote, they set their own goals, they set their own activities, they discover how they like to learn best. And they go into their own review, reviewing their own performance. Now, I have to say I'm an extremely autonomous learner, extremely autonomous. I left school when I was 16. I hated school. I went back to learning at the age of 23. And I connected with the University of Universidad Nacional de Educación a Distancia de Madrid. So the UNED in Madrid, which was a distance university. And that's when I learned how to learn, because I was able to learn by myself. I was an autonomous learner. School didn't give me any of that. And I was able to set my own pace, able to set my own, let's say, curricula of what I needed to do. And really, it worked phenomenally for me. And I think the problem is that many, many times we don't show children how to do this at all. And throughout my life, you know, I've taught myself Spanish, I've taught myself Italian, I've taught myself German. All the languages are self-taught. How can we help people to understand that, yes, you can learn by yourself? Now, I don't say that so that we're all redundant, we've got no jobs. What I'm saying is that we can accompany you on a learning process, but you have, well, I want to empower you to understand that you can do it. And most of it's going to come from you, not from me. That's empowering, that's coaching. And that's what we need in education, so that kids understand that they don't need to depend, they can self-depend. And how do we provide certainty? You know, underlying any language learning, there is a lot of uncertainty. My coaches know that I always ask a very poignant question. Who of us will die fully knowing our native language? I know that none of us are going to put our hands up. So if that's the uncertainty with native, where is the certainty with target language? And the interesting thing is that if there is uncertainty, the amygdala is fully focused on that threat. So we need to be securing and making more certain the language learning process. We need to explain, hey, you know what? You're never going to know your native language fully. What we need in the target language is to get you to a point where you feel confident that you can communicate. And we're going to bring certainty through signposting constantly. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. All the way through, everything that we do is with signposting. And we're going to make sure that we are telling them about the learning process, that we're telling them about the brain, how the brain works, the neuroscience, everything. And we are going to have the bridge between schedules, let's say a roadmap for the individual learner or learners versus the spontaneity of coaching. We have both of them. We do have a roadmap. The learner has a roadmap. We're not just there to, what do you want to do today? No, we have a concrete roadmap based on their goals, their actions. But in that roadmap, we will have moments where we're spontaneous and you're dancing with your learner. I just had another wild mic there. I'm going to open the mics in a minute, everybody, and we're going to go into questions very soon. Final one. No connection to the language learning process or the language itself. We have to connect them in. We have to plug them into the language. Making it real, making it personal is going to really connect them in. You know, living in many different countries has made me realize that basic life in every country is more or less the same. We all go to the supermarket. So we all buy food. We all buy water. We all kind of need shelter. We all, if you have a car, you go to the gas station, you get petrol in, you go and clean your car. We all do very similar things in all the different languages. Your learners might not really understand this. I know it sounds bizarre, but I didn't. Until some point I realized, oh, okay, I'm just doing this in German now. Or I'm just doing this in French now. Okay. How can you get your learners to really come into normalizing the language, making it real, making it personal for them? Lucian, you've given us a beautiful example earlier of your little girl with makeup. She now realizes that she can talk about makeup in English. Wow. That's what you need. You need those aha moments for your learners to really connect in to the language. What's going to make them connect in? You have to find out. And talk about the language learning process. Talk about the learning plateau. Many of our learners, the same as the panic attacks, we all think that everybody else doesn't have them. We all think that nobody else is on a learning plateau. We all go on that learning plateau where we think for months and months, nothing's happening. I'm not learning the language. It's not getting any better. I don't understand anything. And then suddenly we understand a bit more. Talk to the learners about this. How are they feeling? Are they feeling this plateau? How can we help you to feel better with this plateau? How can I help you to understand that actually when you're on that plateau, your subconscious brain is trying to piece the language together. It is working in the background. You just don't know what it's doing. And definitely, how can they connect with others who are also sharing, that experience, or maybe they're going through the same pain? And who could support your learners in their learning? Who's going to be their cheerleaders? Who's going to be their accountability partner apart from you? Who else could they get on board to accompany them in this learning process? Now, in everything that we do, we have these powerful coaching conversations, not only to coach around the emotional triggers, but also how to troubleshoot dilemmas, learning questions, learning how to learn, and talking about the neuroscience. So everything is about the coaching, professional coaching in action. We're not there to sort out their, somebody said to me today, I was talking to somebody who's coming to the conference next year, and he was going on about how coaching is for therapy. No, this has nothing to do with therapy at all. We are not therapists. We're not using coaching from a life perspective. We're using it from a language learning aid, if you like. It's a vehicle that's helping us to communicate better and to bring across that learning experience in a much more impacting way. So language learning in the 21st century, definitely with more sensitivity. And I do think that we are bridging that sort of coaching-teaching dichotomy. That's what we're doing as neurolanguage coaches. And just to finish up, everybody, I'm not sure what the time is. Goodness, is that the time already? We are, I'm going to say, a professional network of like-minded, beautiful individuals, beautiful brains, who are connected in that desire to bring education into a different gear across the world. We will be having the conference in Sitges, Barcelona. We will be announcing it over the next days, everybody. That first conference is going to be for neurolanguage coaches only. And then in the summer, we're going to have a second one, which is the Neuroheart Education Conference. And that one is the one that's open to the world. We have finally got the constitution of the foundation in September, and I'm hoping if I can get some clear brain space and clear time on my agenda, we're going to start rolling with that in January. And by the way, I will be looking for a team of volunteers to help me with that. So I will be putting that out, that message out across the network very, very soon.